Hello and welcome to the world-famous and award-winning Driving You Crazy podcast. This is the show where we talk about all things transportation, anything that gets you from here to there. I'm the driving anchor and transportation reporter for Denver 7 News, Jason Luber, and if you would like to be on the show, contact me in any way, you sure can. The number for the listener hotline is 303-832-0217. If you wouldn't mind rating the show on whichever platform you're listening on, I sure would appreciate that as well. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice. I sure can. But this is probably the best I've sounded in 2 weeks. And it's been a real struggle being sick because, I talk for a living, and it's very frustrating. But the good news has been is I was just on a vacation on a cruise down to the Gulf and into Central America and Mexico. And so I didn't have to talk. I could just point to things and say I would like that drink, or I would like that food, or I would like to do that activity. So I did a lot less talking and a lot more pointing at things. And when I tried to talk, it was never great. But I had the full round of antibiotics and steroids and cough things and whatever. And so I am definitely on the mend, and maybe next time I'll talk more about the trip down there, because it was fantastic. Here briefly, flew down to Miami, took the it was actually cheaper for me to rent a car in Miami. So we flew into Miami, which is a god awful airport. Oh my goodness, for being such a large metropolitan city, for being such a world destination city, and for being such a connection city, for United States flights and world flights going all kinds of places. That is a god-awful airport. Oh, man, it is just it really needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, and it is real bad. Anyway, so it was cheaper for me to get a Uber, or to rent a car than an Uber from Miami to drive up to a hotel that we booked up in Fort Lauderdale, where the cruise ship was, park overnight, and then return the car over to Fort Lauderdale Airport, then drive an Uber. Yeah, it was less money. And then I had a car so that I could drive to the urgent care center and go get some antibiotics because I had this horrible whatever in my body. And I didn't want to go to cruise ship jail for getting on the ship sick. Because that can happen. Anyway, then it was a cruise, Princess Cruise, the Sun Princess, interesting ship, not my favorite. Princess line. This is my second Princess cruise. It's fine. They do a pretty decent job. But I like the Royal Caribbean ships better. I just think they're more sporty and there's more open spaces, and it just, for me, I like those ships better. Anyhow, a couple of days at sea, went to Honduras and petted some monkeys. Actually, one of the monkeys peed on my little nephew, right on his head. Great video. You can see it on my Instagram page. Held a sloth, something I've always wanted to do, be around a sloth. Sloths are so cool. Got to hold a sloth. Did some snorkeling. Then we went up to Belize, where I did the cave tubing again, which was really cool, where you have to drive way out, like almost an hour outside of Belize City. And then at first you have to tender from the ship to Belize City because you can't get close because of the way it's anyway. So you have to tender in. That takes 25 minutes. And then you have to get on this van and you're driving out to God knows where, out in the middle of Belize, to this river that goes through these caves. Super cool, and then did some zip lining there. Then on the next day, went to Cozumel. We just had basically a beach day, which was cool. And then a couple of days back at sea, and then to Fort Lauderdale, and then back home. So that was very short summary of the trip because I don't want, my voice is not great, and I don't want to kill it before my next interview that's coming up here in just a second. But it was a great time. I love the driving in these smaller places just because there are fewer people. It's just a different style of driving. It's just people are not as pretentious in their cars because I don't think it's an extension of them in their car in these other places. And so the driving is just so much more relaxed than it is here in the United States. It's just totally different. Anyway, maybe I'll talk more about the trip next time when I have more of a voice. But I wanted to talk about cars because we've heard a lot about the trade wars going on right now between the United States and just about every car-making country in the world, and automakers, Ford and domestic. They're all caught in the middle. Could this be a challenge or an opportunity for car makers? So joining me now to answer not only that question, but much more about what the 2025 car market looks like, automotive trends are looking like, is longtime automotive expert James Bell, who is the head of corporate communications for Kia America. James, thanks so much for being here on the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast.
Nah, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
So you're a car guy, and you've been around cars for a majority of your working career. If money were no object, what kind of car would you buy? And please tell me it was a Volkswagen thing.
Oh, it's quite funny you mentioned that. My grandfather was a huge Volkswagen fan, one of the first in his neighborhood to have a Beetle way back in the day. And I always did fancy a thing, but I have to admit I have a fully restored and gorgeous 1966 Volkswagen 21-window microbus.
Oh, cool.
Which, so when you say money's no object, well, I kind of already have it.
Right.
But I would like to get something as well, probably something that doesn't exist yet, and that would be in the electric sports car range.
Oh, cool.
Because when you drive an electric car and you feel that surge of instant torque, I just can't wait to see how that gets applied into what Porsche or Ferrari or others do with that.
They do have an issue though in snow and ice. I'll tell you that because I have a Chevy Volt that I've had for the last 10 or 11 years, and the torque does play a role in driving in ice and snow.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it does. Yeah. Well, and I would imagine your Chevy probably has more economic, or as what am I saying? Tires that are better for giving you better mileage than getting through snow. That's what
and I've changed them since then because the original factory tires exactly that. But out here in Colorado, it's better to have better snow tires. What do you drive now?
I have a Kia EV6.
Nice.
300 plus miles of range. Fully charges in about 15 minutes on a high-speed charge. I'll never go back to gasoline. I'm sold.
Cool. Interesting that your name on X is @_petrolhead. Does that mean you're a fan of the old muscle cars, or just like the smell of gasoline in the morning?
Well, where I keep my bus in my garage, it has a nice wafting scent of gasoline a little bit. I mean, ultimately, I think I just love the automotive industry and have since I was a little boy. If I can just tell you a quick story, my mother is very proud of this. When I was maybe 9 years old, we went to the grocery store together and going to the checkout line, and Mom said, I saw the magazine rack off to the side, and I said, Mom, can I get something? And she claims to think that I would come back with a comic book or something like that. And I came back with all the car magazines. Yeah. And she said, I said one. And I said, I want all of them. And I read them cover to cover, and I've been completely hooked and petrol in my veins ever since.
Perfect. Yeah, I was a big fan of the Auto Trader magazine when I was growing up.
Oh, yes.
Love that one.
Just coming through that thing. Yes.
So looking at 2025, I was reading through Edmunds, and they have a new car forecast, and they believe sales are going to be only slightly higher over last year, basically flat. But that outlook was made before the tariff war that we're seeing more and more news about. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But how do you see at Kia the 2025 outlook?
We feel very bullish on it, actually. We feel that our lineup is it fills some of the holes that our competitors have left open. When Ford and Chevrolet and others peeled out of the sedan market, I was asked by members of the media constantly, I guess Kia will follow suit. And we said, no way, we're going to stay in there. In fact, we're going to come out with even better product in that space. And so we feel that our lineup is very resilient to any ups and downs and lefts and rights of the market, because we run the gamut from, affordable internal combustion and electrified sedans and crossovers all the way through our Kia EV9, which is, a 3-row, 7-passenger full electric SUV, which is obviously where a lot of the heat of the market is. So we feel very confident going into 2026 and beyond, because we have, again, this full spectrum of choice. And so no matter where customers' heads are, we know that they'll find something good at a Kia dealership.
Yeah, my guest is James Bell. He's the head of corporate communications at Kia America. We're talking about the car markets and tariffs, and we'll talk about some other stuff in just a bit. But there is a ton of talk about tariffs, obviously, and there's some parts on the list, but not others on the list. And there's rules for some kind of cars and not other kind of cars, and how they affect automakers and parts suppliers, really specifically, is still being sorted out. Kia is a South Korean automaker. But you make cars in the United States, over there in Georgia, but you also have a plant down in Mexico that sends car to the United States. So there has to be a web of rules that has to be challenging to follow and figure out, depending on where your cars are coming from, where the parts are coming from. How are you all dealing with all of these different rules that are just dropped on you in the last couple weeks?
Well, I mean, the auto industry, I like to say sometimes it turns with about the speed of an ocean liner. It's a big machine to move along, and you cannot plan on things that are dropped on you within weeks, as you just said, or even months. You have to have a long range plan. That's the degree of engineering and testing and validating that goes into a vehicle that then can be sold to the U.S. Marketplace is tremendous, and we at Kia take that very seriously. So I think we're kind of making sure, again, as I said earlier, that we have a full range of products available for any market situation, and we feel pretty strong that we're in a good space on this. We're watching it closely, obviously. In fact, I'm here in Savannah, Georgia, getting ready for the grand opening of an all-new factory. $7.59 billion investment in the local community, 8,500 new jobs. And that just says for the people in the factory, not let alone all the ancillary businesses like the trucking business and the hotels and the food and everything else. So, we continue to invest. These are investments that we made well before there was talks of tariffs, even before the Inflation Reduction Act. So from the previous administration. So we know Kia knows who we are. We know that we're very confident. We know that our products resonate. We know that we have a great plan. And so we're just working that plan.
Yeah, but all we hear about, with news stories is that the price of everything is going to jump up instantly. So realistically, is there going to be a price increase in the next couple of weeks or months of a Sportage or a Sorento?
You said it earlier at the start. We're trying to figure this out as it goes. So I don't know the answer to that question. I doubt if many people do, because we just the regulatory marketplace is rather fluid these days, shall we say.
And it's probably the same for the automakers that are in Japan or in Europe or other parts of the world, because they're dealing with the same, tariffs and issues that you guys are dealing with.
Yeah, again, the auto industry is not super simple to pivot, but I will say that some place that Kia is very, very good. I've been with the company for almost 10 years now, and when this company puts its mind to something, you better stand back, because it's going to happen. And that not only is there the confidence in our momentum and our direction and our plan, but then also in our ability to say, oh, here's a shift. Let's modify our plan slightly to make sure that we always address every corner of the marketplace. And the other thing that's maybe interesting is that the Kia brand, based on its history in the U.S., has a strong reputation for value. Value is not a dirty word. Yeah. People automatically assume that means cheap or something like that. Well, if you've been in a Kia over the last 6 or 7 years, our vehicles are world-class, winning every world-class award, just loved by media and Kia owners alike. So we feel that we have a lineup that can keep addressing that while still having that sense of value. And so we feel pretty good.
And it seems like the current lessees might be in a good position right now, because they've already locked in a price. They're renting the vehicle to the point where they might have to turn it in. But when they do turn it in, it might be actually better value for them than to buy the vehicle right now, than have to worry about anything that happens with tariffs or anything like that.
Yeah, I would say, as we said earlier, it's just basically very difficult, shall we say, to make a business planning within the current environment. So I would definitely, counsel any consumers just to, if you have a lease that's coming off, just check with your dealer, see what the latest buyouts are, and make it the best decision at the time. But just the fluidity of this situation makes it pretty hard to forecast.
Right. My guest is James Bell, is the head of corporate communications at Kia America. With the change in administration, as you mentioned, there comes a change in the pressure on automakers to create only electric vehicles. You were with GM for a while. You know they made that pledge to have built 1 million EVs by now, and they were set to go all electric in 10 years, but they have since pulled back on that. At Kia, you have a mix of electric and hybrid and gasoline vehicles. Do you see that becoming a trend in the next 5 to 10 or more years, a mix of all three, where you're still going to see all three and not just all push to electric?
We've always seen it that way, to be candid. I mean, we have, a tremendous selection of internal combustion vehicles. Our Kia K4, which replaced the Forte, is currently our number one seller in our lineup right now. And I was just, I mentioned I'm here in Georgia. I was just out having lunch down in downtown Savannah. And while I was sat at the corner, I saw 3 K4s drive by. So obviously something's catching on here. But when you talk about, future propulsion, it will be a kind of a spectrum of choice. We're very big in internal combustion, very big in hybrid, very big in plug-in hybrid, and we'll continue to focus also on electric vehicles. At the New York Auto Show next month, I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you this, but we're going to have a really exciting and sexy all-electric sedan, which is part of the market, which has been a little neglected to this point, in a vehicle called the EV4. So we'll have that coming out. Oh, not only is it a unique body style, but also going to be very affordable. So a lot of people, I think, who are considering electric vehicles today just automatically assume it's going to be more expensive. Yeah. But when you see the EV4 and then our EV3 coming out later next year, these are the EVs that I think will help move the average American customer or person considering going electric a big step that way, because there's very few compromises. And once you make the move to electric transportation, I find it incredibly luxurious. No more visits to gas stations. No more, leaving the house and looking at the gas tank and thinking, "Oh crap, I don't have time, and I got to get gas." All those things are washed away, and then the driving experience is very luxurious in the power that's available, the torque that's available, the quietness. You don't hear the engine running at stoplights. There's just something that's very, very different about electrified transportation. And with hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and full EVs, Kia is ready.
Now, I'm not calling my wife a dingbat, but she's the kind of person that if she had an electric car, she would forget to plug it in. She would just forget to do it. She is the kind of person that says, "Oh, my gas tank is empty now. I can go pull out and get 5 minutes, and then I'm getting gas." So There are still some people that aren't ever going to be in that mindset to be able to take care of an electric car like they need to. And then, of course, there are the people who are living in apartments and condos who can't run a extension cord out of the 5th-story apartment building down to the street, right? So, and I think one of the concerns is the battery range and thinking about fueling your vehicle in a different way and almost all the time. I know that because I've had my Volt for 11 years. Is Kia working with any of the battery makers maybe, or just leaving it up to them, or looking at new battery technology and how that really can be pushed forward?
Oh yeah. Well, first off, to answer your question about batteries, yes, we are very, very deeply involved with many of the world's leading battery companies to find the next big thing. And there's great investments going on in different battery chemistries and so forth, not only to make them, give greater range, but also be able to charge faster and be made of less rare earth materials to be more recyclable and more, nicer to the earth, if you will. So that's one side of it. But the other side is a fantastic partnership that we've entered into with 7 other car companies called Iona. And I challenge you and your viewers and listeners to be on the lookout for an Iona station near you. This is the way I can best describe what this charging experience will be like. And this, of course, differs greatly from the way you see charging, maybe Electrify America or others now that are behind a Costco or behind the grocery store, something like that. Maybe not the most hospitable places sometimes. When people drive by these Iona stations, and I can promise you this, they're going to look at that and say, I wish I had an EV, because that looks like a nice place to be for a little bit. And the charging will all be level 3, high-speed charging. As I mentioned with the Kia, you can be back on the road in about 15 minutes because of the way our battery charging is set up. And the Iona stations will be lovely places to be. It's not just plug in and then sit in your car. You'll be sent a code that allows you access to very clean bathrooms. There'll be a barista there to make coffee and snacks. It'll be a little, as you could say, a little reservoir of calm in our very busy days, and while you're charging at high speed. So
Yeah.
I think for those people that you mentioned that are, can't charge at home or forget to charge at home, there's going to be lots of options on the road very soon. Iona is saying over 30,000 charge points across the country in just a couple of years.
Well, and I think that's going to be the transformation, is that
Yeah.
you need that infrastructure right now, because the electric vehicles came before the infrastructure was really in place, and I think that has set it back with the feeling of the average consumer that's out there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we are in a transitional time. It must feel a little bit like when we went from horse-drawn carriages to gasoline power. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't easy. I'm sure there was a lot of people saying, I'm never going to give up my horse. Well, guess what? Time moves on.
Yep.
And I think this transition to electrified, and I say electrified meaning hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and full EV, is a, to use a baseball game analogy, I feel like we're in about the top of the second inning. This is just really getting started, and it's only going to accelerate from here.
Interesting. My guest is James Bell. He's the head of corporate communications with Kia America. We've been talking about car market tariffs, electric cars. But as far as the car styles, and you did mention this just briefly, there really are only two major styles of family cars right now. There's the sedan and the crossover. The crossover looks basically the same between all the automakers. Nissan wrecked the Pathfinder, turned it from a truck into, because it used to be like a go up against the Forerunner, right? But now it looks just like all the other crossovers. Why have we become so homogenous with the look of all of these different vehicles?
Well, a lot of it has to do with aerodynamics and trying to eke out every last bit of efficiency. The moving a piece of metal and glass at high speed through air requires either more energy to push it or less resistance to assist that. And so I think you're right. We have become accustomed to that, especially because the U.S. market is so focused on crossovers and SUVs. In order to make that two-box big design work for the most efficiency, it has to have that kind of signature look. But I think, there's room for innovation in this. I think there's a great opportunity for sedans, as you mentioned. I already mentioned our K4 sedan, which is off to a fantastic start. People are loving the design and the look of that. It's almost like the anti-SUV or anti-crossover, because most American families, I firmly believe that we have a very strange buying psyche here. We have a sense of, I must buy something that will address everything I might ever do ever. I might one day load up all my friends and my dog and my tents and everything and go camping on top of a mountaintop. I might one day go to the airport and have to bring home, my uncle and my aunt and my 19 cousins. Guess what, folks? 99% of the time, most American vehicles are being driven by one person, commuting, highway driving, so on and so forth. And the idea of having a big SUV may not be the most wise choice, to be very candid. And then you add into it, sedans are often easier to drive, more agile, more aerodynamic, so more efficient, less money to insure, less money to operate. So there's a lot of things that make you say, and look, don't get me wrong, Kia's lineup is, we're about 74% crossovers and SUVs. So we know that that's where the market is, but we are also very bullish on seeing, I wouldn't say a return of, but a kind of reassociation with the sedan as being probably a better choice for most American families.
Then could you see a time where we have a future of even smaller cars than the regular sedan, smaller than the traditional sedans, or is the market too niche for people wanting a smaller car for let's say a really urban setting?
That's a great question. And as an automotive enthusiast and student of this business, I wish there was more room for smaller cars in the U.S. marketplace, but there just does not seem to be an appetite. And I think that, again, that plays into the American car buying psyche of, I need the most I can possibly get right now. And so the idea of having something that's wise for the other 99% of the time often slides away. So, I mean, we've seen chances like by Smart and Honda and other manufacturers bringing out very small vehicles, and they've done some business for a time, but it inevitably kind of lose favor. So sadly, while the rest of the world, the Asian market, the European market embraces more right-sized transportation, we continue to be a little bit, have little larger aspirations. And again, this plays back to how Kia is ready to hit any customer across the spectrum.
Yeah, but I was just down in Central America and even driving in Mexico. They have smaller cars in general made by the same car makers.
Yes.
Yeah, and so so the cars are out there. They're just not maybe being just brought to the U.S. market, and maybe it's just like you said, United States drivers and buyers are just not interested.
Well, and I think part of that plays into the fact that because the SUV and crossover market has been so dominant the last 20 years or so, if you get yourself into a smaller car and you head out in America's boulevards and highways, you're going to feel pretty small out there because the vehicles are so. I was just recently in England and I was laughing to myself where, pulling into a car park and wow, if you pulled an F-150 in there, it would take 2 spots. So it's just a different psyche. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just different. And, the world's car makers, as you point out, have different vehicles for different markets for that reason. And while some have tried to crack the small car market here, it at least for the time being, it seems to be a difficult proposition.
Yeah, and I know you got to run, but I wanted to ask you about, because newer cars have been pushing forward more and more with these large screens. Tesla is famous for that large screen, and a lot of the new cars have these large screens, right? It controls all the systems, but there's some of us, and you should know from your microbus, who miss the days of buttons and knobs and and switches, right? Maybe not a hand crank for the window, but some technology. Having all this technology is sometimes too much.
Well, wow. It's almost like I asked you to ask me that question. Thank you. Because we do at Kia, we do very, very well in JD Power scoring. And when you dig into those numbers, one of the main points that really jump out is the fact that our user interface system, the screens, the controls and so forth, when you get in the car, we do a fantastic job of blending the high tech. We've got the screens and all the different technology that's available there. But then for those functions and features that you need on a regular basis, I need to turn the radio up. I need to make it cooler in the car or warmer. I need to find the steering wheel heater button. Just those rapid fire things that you do, while you're driving, by the way, those are available easy and at hand. Every time when we poll customers who recently bought a Kia vehicle, they say, I love it because I could just get in it and automatically know how things work. It's just easier that way. We see this at Volkswagen. They recently announced that they're kind of retracting from their screen intensive user interface and going back to having the buttons that matter. Well, Kia's been there forever. So we see the sex appeal or the sizzle, if you will, of the bigger screens. But when you're, a year down the road and you're still having to swipe through screens to make easy little adjustments, not only is that a bit cumbersome, but it's also it impacts safety.
Yeah,
your eyes and your brain are not focused on the job at hand. You're not pulling off to the side of the road to swipe through screens to be able to put on the seat heater. Yeah. You're doing it while you're driving, and that's probably not the safest thing to do.
And I lied before. This is the last question. Do you ever see a time of autonomous? I know a lot of car makers are keeping you push for autonomy. Where do you see the autonomous car market in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
Well, my personal view is that the quicker we get to autonomy, the faster we'll get to much safer roads, because the most dangerous part of any car that's driving down the road is the driver.
Yeah.
We become distracted. We look at our phones. We're looking at screens, trying to figure out how to put on the seat heater. We're sleepy. We've been drinking. We're the weak link in this, folks. Yeah. So when we get closer into autonomous driving space, the sooner. And, speaking on behalf of the industry, the technology is available. We just need to make sure that it's introduced in ways that people are comfortable with. And, those sensors, they never get tired. They never blink. They never look away. That sounds like a good thing to me.
Yeah. I think, the infrastructure is still going to be the weak link there because I know from getting off a cruise boat, trying to catch an Uber, everybody is on their phone. You have 4,000 people on their phone trying to do the exact same thing, and you can't get connected. So when you can't get connected, then your car is basically dead.
It will come. I mean, this has been a great chat because we've been talking about very clear futures for the industry.
Yeah.
Not tomorrow, not next year, but inevitably will happen. And that's what's fun about the car business.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate your time. Really fun conversation. James Bill, head of corporate communications for Kia America. Thanks for your time today.
Anytime. I love talking cars, and it seems like you do too.
Definitely do. Thanks.
Thank you.
And of course, you can find them at kia.com. It'll be interesting to see. Not only James was mentioning the auto show. There's a lot of auto shows coming up. We have Los Angeles and Detroit and Denver is coming up, and see all these different the new cars that are coming out there. I really like to see those. Those prototype cars, the fantasy cars, those that they sometimes drop. Usually it's in Detroit or Los Angeles, the big ones that they put those cars out there and see what they look like. So those are always fun to see. But as James was talking about, the infrastructure of this place, Iona, in the United States, I was just thinking about when I was driving in Belize or driving in Honduras. You're not going to, those places are not going to see that kind of infrastructure. They will, for the foreseeable future, I'm talking like the next 20 to 30 to maybe even 40 years, they will be on gasoline. You might have some isolated areas of these countries that will have electric, or some individual people that might have electric, but they don't have the infrastructure, and they might not have the infrastructure for decades to deal with, electric vehicles. And that's fine. And that's what Toyota, and I didn't mention it to James, but Toyota is famously not pushing all electric either, because they sell their cars and especially their pickup trucks all around the world to places that will not go electric anytime soon. And that's just fine. It's fine to have a mix of all types of vehicles, and maybe that's what we should. Everybody should be able to choose whatever vehicle they want to drive, and if they want to drive an electric vehicle, great. It's funny how James was talking about the electric vehicle experience, and it's, to be honest, a car is a car. Yes, you do have a different torque a little bit, just like if you're driving a golf cart where you hit the gas and off it goes. But it's not that much different. I mean, the rest of the vehicle is basically the same as you're driving a gas car. Yeah, you don't hear the engine. And so when you're sliding on ice and you're trying to, get out of a snowdrift, and you're trying and you hit the gas, you don't know that the tire is spinning because you can't hear the engine revving. Anyway, I thought it was interesting to hear his perspective. Now, maybe that was some corporate speak in there, because he's very good at that. A guy with his experience should be. But driving an electric car is like driving just basically like any other car. If it's new, it's going to be fancier than if it's old. Boom, there it is. All right, thanks again. Thanks again for suffering through my voice. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, I'm Jason Luber, the traffic guy. Be safe, and as always, happy motoring.